Hello. Okay, so now that we know a little bit more about parabolas, we're going to focus on the line of symmetry and specifically talk about that and how we find that when we might not have a graph. Okay, so just a refresher, our line of symmetry is the line that divides the shape into two equal halves. So again, that'll be right down the middle, and it should pass through this very important point called the vertex. And for parabolas, our line of symmetry will always be a vertical line, so it'll always be, the equation will always be x equals something. In this case, like we said last time, this would be 1, because that's where it crosses the x-axis right there. Okay, and again, passes through the vertex of the parabola. Okay, so it was pretty easy to find. If you're given a graph, it's pretty easy to sketch in and look at the graph and see if you can find that. Just a quick note, this is also, sometimes instead of saying line, people say axis of symmetry instead of line of symmetry. They mean the same thing. So if you hear one of those, they're the same. So we're going to really focus on how do we find a line of symmetry if you don't have a graph this time. So in other words, instead of given a graph here, notice we have a quadratic function, the formula there. So if this is the case, we already know that a line of symmetry, the equation should be x equals something. So you're going to notice here the equation or the formula has that x in there already. Okay. So then what you want to do is you want to say, all right, what is my b value, my green value right there? And you're going to write the opposite of that. So if it's positive, you're going to write negative b. If it's negative, you can write positive. So I usually just like to say, when I see this symbol, I think opposite of b. And then you're going to divide that by 2 times whatever a is, and the a value is right here. Okay, so whatever's in front of the x squared. Just make sure that this equation here is in standard form. You'll notice we're not really talking about this c value yet, and that really won't come into play today. So the formula is x equals opposite of b over 2 times a, and that will give you your equation x equals something, right? And in this case, in theory, we would have gotten x equals 1. So we're going to do that for a couple of problems. Your assignment will look kind of like this. It'll say find the equation for the line of symmetry for each quadratic function. Okay, so we don't have a graph, and we just are trying to find the axis of symmetry. So what you're going to do is write your formula first. So x equals negative b, or opposite of b, over 2 times a. Okay, so b is this number right here in front of the x. It's positive 24. When we write this, though, it says it's got to be the opposite of that, so we're going to write negative 24. Okay, over, now this 2 in the formula is always part of that. That 2 right there is always part of the formula, so you're just going to leave it there. So 2 times a. Our a value is right there in front of the x squared. It's negative 3. So you're looking at the coefficient. No variables when you do this other than this x equals that you wrote. Okay? So now you want to simplify this a bit. So I'm going to say this is negative 24. And then on the bottom, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Okay, watch your signs. That's really important. If you get the sign wrong, then this can mess you up. Okay, so now you're going to say, what is negative 24 divided by negative 6? Negative divided by negative is a positive. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So we get x equals 4. This is my line of symmetry. So that means the graph should be a vertical line at 4. Make sure when you do this, you have the x equals part in there. It's got to be there, otherwise it's not a line. If you just write 4, it's not the same thing. So make sure it says x equals. The formula is built in that way, so you should be good, but don't forget it. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, so this time I'm not going to write the formula. We've got it right here, so I'm just going to follow that. So opposite of b. Now there's nothing in front of x here, but we're not going to write x. It's a number. This should be a number. Remember, if there's nothing written here, this is really a 1. So that's really negative 1 because there's a negative sign in front. So we're right. Opposite of b, well, the opposite of negative 1 is positive 1 over 2. Remember that 2's got to be there. It's a part of the formula. Times, what's my a value? Also 2. Okay? And then I'm going to simplify the bottom. So I have 1 over 4. Now, if you have a fraction, like this, you want to see if you can reduce that. So I have 1/4. You can leave it in fraction form. So let's just try that on our calculator. Pull that up real quickly. Okay, so if I say 1 divided by 4, you get 0.25. You could write that, or you could just go math, right? The reduced version of that, still 1/4. So then we're just going to leave this as our answer here, or you could also write 0.25. Again, the important thing here is making sure that it says x equals. Okay? And that's finding the line of symmetry from an equation, a quadratic function, rather than a graph. Hope that makes sense. All right, we'll see ya.